Throughout a good majority of the franchise of Metal Gear Solid, there is a real-world backdrop taking place within world affairs, especially that concerning Metal Gear Solid 3 in the backdrop during the Cold War, where the uncertainty of the world's fate lied in two nations' hands. A theme based around spies and espionage between superpowers as the USA and Russia, with proxy wars, espionage propaganda, and nuclear threats. Throughout the history of the world, there has been many messiahs, leaders, dictators, all of which have different ideologies and beliefs. And one of those being that of the boss, and the will that she carried, and the world that it embodied. To this day, people still try and find a reason behind the boss's will, but don't seem to understand on how to make the will become a reality. The boss's will was very ambitious. From the beginning of time, human beings have been at war. Thanks for joining the voice box as we discuss why the boss's will was wrong.
The world must be made whole again.
In 1964, Naked Snake is being tasked with a mission, Operation Snake Eater, in which he was tasked to rescue Sokolov, but ran into a snag as it turns out that the boss had defected, being completely unaware of the true objective of the United States government, which would be using the boss and Snake in order to retrieve the Philosopher's legacy, a giant amass of funds that Colonel Volgin's father left behind to him. The US government wished to acquire the Philosopher's legacy to become the main stage superpower in the world. The boss is a renowned legendary soldier, the mother of special forces, known worldwide for her patriotic duties, and serving time in the war with Major Zero, her greatest friend at the time, and also Naked Snake, her greatest disciple, in which she raised and taught the techniques of CQC. The boss's very existence is sad and tragic in its own right, being used by governments in order for their own gain of the interests of what makes a human being at its worst, power and greed. With the two miniature nuclear shells that the boss had gifted Volgin, the nuke would be launched, causing the spark incident between Russia and the United States, in which America had to prove its innocence, and in order to do so, mean killing the boss. But the boss knew this was the objective the entire time.
Even if they are our enemies, they're still our countrymen.
But it won't be me that pulled the trigger. It'll be our friend, the American defector.
And the boss, being very loyal to her purpose, and being a loyal patriot to her country, would be revered and hated by several nations worldwide as being the monster that almost conflicted the entire world up in nuclear Armageddon. Although that wasn't the truth, it would be the fabricated lie that the American government would tell the entire world for their own greedy ends. With such a noble, charismatic, wise soldier such as the boss that would have changed the world for a better, was in her final resting place due to fighting for a cause that did not change the world for the better, only defeated the monster that is politics and war. The boss wished to see a world united under one banner, a world where we could see peace and unity. The boss was the first woman sent to space, and what she saw made her realize how small and fragile the human race is, and that we're all floating on this celestial body, killing and destroying one another, and divided through separate nations and ideologies.
In 1960, I saw a vision of the ideal future from space. I could see the planet as it appeared from space. That's when it finally hit me. Space exploration is nothing but another game in the power struggle between the US and the USSR. Politics, economics, the arms race, they're all just arenas for meaningless competition. I'm sure you can see that, but the Earth itself has no boundaries. No East, no West, no Cold War. And the irony of it is, the United States and the Soviet Union are spending billions on their space programs and the missile race, only to arrive at the same conclusion. In the 21st century, everyone will be able to see that we are all just inhabitants of a little celestial body called Earth. A world without communism or capitalism, that is the world I wanted to see. But reality continued to betray me.
The beauty of the boss with her wisdom is that she wasn't arrogant about her will. She was more than aware that nations across the world would always be up in arms. But the boss's will could never be imagined because it was impossible to try and change the world, which is always up in conflict and is forever divided. Many people across the world have tried to bring around the said world peace. But one thing that people will not want to admit is that the real problem lies within the human condition, And just like everything else on this planet, we are at war, as it has been since the beginning of time with kings and queens. It's a common pattern and occurrence throughout the world that throughout a certain amount of time there may be a world peace, but only to an extent. But behind all that is a lot more messy because there's conflicts taking place, scandals and economic manipulation. The kinds of things of which the boss was mentioning, such as capitalism. But it's very hypocritical in a sense from her part, because the kind of world that she envisioned, she was a part of, such as the American government with its ideologies and believing a capitalist society in which she fought and died for. As mentioned in Peace Walker, Big Boss could not let go of the past, of forgetting the boss, his most beloved disciple, but in the end would, as he realized that her life, as she valued it, was a betrayal on his end, for just throwing her life away to an organization that used her nothing more than as a pawn.
Snake, you don't mean...
I'm done looking for the truth.
What are you saying, Snake?
I was wrong.
Come on, boss. Everybody's waiting for you.
She betrayed me, Kaz.
She what?
In the end, she put down her gun. And when she did, she rejected her entire life up to that point, including me.
What do you mean?
In giving up her life, she abandoned everything she was as a soldier.
And you consider that betrayal?
I won't make the same choice as her. My future is going to be different.
Whilst the boss may have saved the world from absolute destruction, she at the same time decided to go along with the American government's plans, in which Big Boss hated that idea and decided to make his own military nation that would combat against shadow organizations such as the US in order to find and shape the world in means of war, in a sense playing them at their own game. Respectfully, Big Boss didn't want to be used as a pawn no longer, and wished to fight against those who bring harm and disaster onto the world, and carry out the boss's will based on his own interpretations. Boss's ambition and beliefs were not wrong. Who would not want a world united and brought together? And some might believe that the boss's will is one of arrogance, as who are you to decide how the world should be, since there's billions of people living in it? Who as an individual has the right to decide how one person should change the world? There's questionably no doubt that the boss's loyalties were to her purpose, her mission, as she explains to a naive Snake at the time during Operation Snake Eater on exactly great truths and philosophies on the world.
A soldier is a political tool, nothing more. That's doubly true if he's a career soldier. Right and wrong have no place in his mission. He has no enemies and no friends. Only the mission. You follow the orders you're given. That's what being a soldier is.
Sadly, that's a hard truth that the reality of most people are facing today, as a soldier has no place in terms of political outcomes and the financial world in which they're fighting for. They get the script, they get their missions, and they're told to do their job without questioning a thing. There is no wrong and right in the sense of battle, even though if things are morally questionable. You could say at the time, Big Boss embodied this actual ideology. He was nothing more than a soldier following orders. And the boss was until the very dying day. She followed orders through and through, regardless if she was being used or not, like a discardable object. One can question if Big Boss lost a sense of respect for the boss, simply due to the fact that she handed her life over so easily to a government organization, throwing everything great away that she'd accomplished throughout her career.
I do whatever I have to get the job done. I don't think about politics.
That's not the same thing. Sooner or later, your conscience is going to bother you. In the end, you have to choose whether you're going to live as a soldier or just another man with a gun. There's a saying in the Orient, loyalty to the end. Do you know what it means?
Being patriotic.
It means devoting yourself to your country.
I follow the president and the top brass. I'm ready to die for them if necessary.
The president and the top brass won't be there forever. Once their terms are up, others will take their place.
I follow the will of the leader, no matter who's in charge.
People aren't the ones who dictate the missions.
Then who does?
The times. People's values change over time, and so do the leaders of a country. So there's no such thing as an enemy in absolute terms.
The place where the boss gets her wisdom from is absolutely unfathomable. She's unlike any other war hero throughout history, with her wisdom and knowledge. She's more than aware of the environment around her and the political spectrum in which every soldier is facing in today's age. Who are we to question the reality around us when all we're meant to be doing is taking orders as we're instructed to do so. In the systematic political economy, it's a competition, a race if you will, between superpowers fulfilling all kinds of atrocities worldwide, including many deaths, in a justified war in a means to change the world.
The enemies we fight are only enemies in relative terms, constantly changing with the times. As long as we have loyalty to the end, there's no point in believing in anything, even in those we love.
And that's the way a soldier's supposed to think?
The only thing we can believe in with absolute certainty is the mission, Jack.
No doubt that the boss was a true patriot. She died for the United States and saved the world along with it. So we know what the boss's will is, in order to shape the world for the better. That, of course, being for her intentions. But the will itself is very unrealistic. And when you look at a world today, such as the wars that we're having at the moment between Ukraine and Russia, and the involvement of the Western powers between proxy wars, which is a real questionable thing as of today. And the irony of it all is that the boss mentions this, because superpowers that were friends several years ago may become enemies within the future. A seemingly new Cold War brewing, it seems that history is once again repeating itself. The boss speaks in a very metaphorical, poetic sense, as that tomorrow's ally could be today's enemy, or vice versa, as it is the case between Russia and the United States.
Boss, why are you doing this?
Why? To make the world one again. The foibles of politics and the march of time can turn friends into enemies just as easily as the wind changes. Ridiculous, isn't it? Yesterday's ally becomes today's opposition. And this Cold War? Think back. When I was leading the Cobras, America and Russia were fighting together. Now, consider whether America and Russia will still be enemies in the 21st century.
Regrettably, the world still finds itself up in arms. Since the greatest war of World War I and II, which was a disaster as millions of people tragically lose their lives and homes would be destroyed, it's evident that this is obviously a part of the human condition, because we haven't learned anything from the most disastrous war of them all. It seems though the boss's will has great intentions behind it. It isn't realistic. To have faith that humankind will somehow someday have peace worldwide doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. Because humans that value human life and wish to change it for the better, in such as the case for war, try to take down evil dictators and warlords. Because those fighting between right and wrong is still an endless bloody battle that still continues to this day. The boss's will is powerful in itself, because even though it's a conception created by Hideo Kojima, it lives on through several other leaders and dictators through the world. People trying to shape a world around what they believe, at a great cost that may affect others at the same time, and leads on to an endless war.
I raised you. I loved you. I've given you weapons, taught you techniques, endowed you with knowledge. There is nothing more for me to give you. All that's left for you to take is my life, by your own hand. One must die, and one must live. No victory, no defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss. And the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle.
The boss would foretell a future that came true. The endless battle that Big Boss would face would ensue. At this point, Big Boss has established his military nation to combat Cypher, and which of, at the time, Cypher itself was controlled by Zero, in which he was trying to fulfill what he believed to be the boss's will by using the United States government in order to control the world. Throughout the franchise of Metal Gear Solid, it's nothing more of short than conflict and ideologies of people continuing a will that started from the boss that spread its way to Big Boss, several of Metal Gear Solid's antagonists which would use the boss's will in a destructive manner, not understanding the true, pure meaning behind such will.
To unite America and the entire world. The Major thought this was his friend's will, but I think he never understood what she wanted.
Coldman sought an MAD-based AI that would deliver an effective retaliatory strike against the most appropriate target in response to a nuclear attack, from a hypothetical adversary. I knew of only one person who could be entrusted with the fate of the entire human race.
What's your real goal here?
To clear her name. I want the truth. The boss's last will.
You could say that the boss's will is the entire expansion of the Metal Gear Solid story. The continuation from what started all them years ago has become a monster in itself, as several people, both protagonist and antagonist, have fought for this will. The only person who got to live long enough to understand what the boss's will truly meant was Big Boss, by the end of Metal Gear Solid 4 as he speaks to Snake. As the wiser and older he became, and had more experience in the field, he started to be understanding that the world wasn't as simple as it seems, and that one can simply not just use the boss's will in order to change the world, but instead to leave it as it was. Because no matter who tried to replicate the boss's will, in the end all it led to was destruction and failure. A beautiful philosophy and idea, which in reality is just as good as a fairy tale. If you take away one evil from the world, another one will appear, continuing the cycle of war.
It's not about changing the world. It's about doing our best to leave the world the way it is. It's about respecting the will of others and believing in your own. At last, I understand the meaning behind what you did. At last, I understand the truth behind your courage.
Boss's will may have been interpreted by many across the world. It seems that Big Boss has come to an understanding of what the boss's will truly meant, as behind her sacrifice to her country was a message and example that everybody should lead by sacrificing themselves to make the world a better place, by being loyal to what you believe in, and fighting and striving for a better world. Usually the belief in the Metal Gear Solid community is that Solid Snake understood the boss's will, which in a physical sense is impossible, as Solid Snake never knew who the boss was. But in terms of ideologies, one can understand why. Solid Snake, I believe, knew so much more better than everyone else in the game. His ideology was above and beyond the rest, as he understood really and truly how the world was. And even though at times it seemed like he was very nihilistic, I think Solid Snake just had a good grip on how the world is, understanding the laws of nature and how human beings can treat one another. Understandably, Solid Snake would have a cold heart, but he still remains doing the right things for the purposes he was meant to be serving the world for, as being the super soldier. It's almost as if the boss is living on through Solid Snake, almost by spirit, and in effect by changing the ideology, which is not about changing or shaping the world to make it become one, but is to believing that the world should just be as it is. Both Solid Snake and the boss share a very tragic history, as Solid Snake is used by a government to be one and done, to get his mission done, and then the Fox Die would eventually take him out, just like the government did, with intending to use Naked Snake to kill out his most beloved disciple, the boss. A perfect example of Solid Snake's wisdom is during the end of Metal Gear Solid 2, when he also has a codec call with Raiden, describing his noble intentions not to change the world, but to make the world a better place.
There's something my best friend said to me once. What? We're not tools of the government or anyone else. Fighting was the only thing I was good at, but at least I always fought for what I believed in.
The only thing I was good at. But at least I always fought for what I believed in.
Are you two really an NGO?
Insofar as we're a non-profit organization of civilians advocating a cause, yes. The cause happens to be the eradication of Metal Gear.
We work on our own, but it's a cause worth fighting for. Why would you stick your neck out for something this risky? That's the way I used to look at it 4 years ago.
We have a responsibility to the coming generations, to the world.
What responsibility?
To keep track of the mistakes we've made as a species.
We need to remember, to spread the word, to fight for change. And that's what keeps me alive. You think you can change the future? I'm not as arrogant as that.
Snake's confirmation was to show that he wasn't trying to change the world, but trying to make it a better place. It would be arrogant from a standpoint to say that I can change the world. It would be for a realistic standpoint to say that we can make the world a better place. Such as Snake and Otacon taking on an NGO and being an anti-Metal Gear organization, shutting down any kind of corruption on the planet. Setting the perfect example and having the great mindset that many have struggled to try to understand. True meaning behind the boss's will, with Solid Snake unknowingly following the boss's will, but making it better and understanding it a lot more than anyone else could. But in the end, the legendary soldier and woman, the boss, would be the ultimate pacifist that really wanted to bring peace amongst the world. By the end of Peace Walker, the world was once again thrown into a nuclear annihilation situation, and where the boss in the AI pod would miraculously drown Peace Walker at the bottom of the ocean, canceling the nuclear sequence. The boss has saved the world many times over, and I think it's not just the idea of what the will, I think it's the message behind the will.
She's drowning herself to stop the transmission.
Look!
You saw it, didn't you? When you went to space, that there's beauty outside of battle. At last, I understand. In the end, it was you who put down your gun and chose instead to sing. There's no peace to be found anywhere. And so, we can only keep on hoping. Hoping for the illusion we call peace.
Question is, will the world ever truly know world peace? Well, it's on for you guys to decide. Please leave me a comment in the section down below and let me know what you think. And hit the like and subscribe button, it really helps the Voice Box channel out. Thank you all again for watching.